Okay, we're still getting some people joining, but I think it is now 2 minutes past 2, and I would like to start welcoming everybody to this event. So, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Dr. Matt Tyra, and I'm the current chair of the Champs Public Health Collaborative Directors of Public Health Board. And I am delighted to see so many of you joining us this afternoon as we celebrate 20 years of collaboration together. And it is my delight to be able to welcome you on behalf of the 10 Directors of Public Health that make up the Champs Board. I just want to go through a few housekeeping items as we start the event. So you may have noticed that we've left cameras on, but all microphones are muted apart from the presenters. The chat will remain open. So please add your name to the chat bar and which organisation you belong to so that we can see who's on the call. Please engage with the event if you want to on social media. We're using the hashtag celebrating 20 years, all one word. We will be taking a break at 2 to 3 for 10 minutes to give everybody a break from their screen. And this event is being recorded and will be available on the Collaborative's YouTube channel after the event. So, it is great to have all of you here. It is a fantastic opportunity to bring all of the colleagues across the public health family together and to be joined by colleagues who have worked with Champs both in the past and in the present. 20 years ago, on the 4th of March 2003 at Aintree, the launch event for the C&M Public Health Network took place. John Ashton, Ruth Hussey, and Janet Atherton, who were all instrumental in the setup of the network, were there at the beginning. But were you there? Give us a thumbs up now if you were at that event, and so that we can get a rough idea of who we've got on the call that have been part of this family for a long time. So at that event, a vision was set out for an inclusive network that would work towards improving the health of the public and their well-being, in addition to addressing and tackling inequalities. This commitment to public health collaboration and the shared aim to improve health and well-being and achieve a reduction in inequalities has stood the test of time, and 20 years later continues now as the Champs Public Health Collaborative. Since then, directors of public health and their teams have worked together with partners across Cheshire and Merseyside to do extraordinary things, from being a key player in advocating for the smoking ban to responding to a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. We have seen innovation and outcomes changes in relation to the prevention of suicide and cardiovascular disease, where we have bucked national and regional trends. Put simply, we are a strong, connected, innovative, and unique public health community that we are all a part of and all belong to. It's also 10 years since public health moved over to local government and has given us more opportunities to influence the public's health through focusing on the wider determinants of health and moving the conversation further upstream. We would also like to mention our key partners who are also celebrating significant dates this year. The NHS, which is 75 years old this year, and the Cheshire and Merseyside Integrated Care System, which reached a year old on the 1st of July. It is essential that we continue to build on our great relationships in Cheshire and Merseyside to achieve our aim of reducing health inequalities. We hope that today will be an uplifting and inspiring event. We have some fantastic speakers, including Andrew Lewis, the new Chief Executive of Liverpool City Council, Dr. Vicky Dardamissis of the UK Health Security Agency, Jim McManus of the Association of Directors of Public Health, Professor Kevin Fenton of the Faculty of Public Health, and David Buck from the King's Fund. And partway through our event, my esteemed colleague, Professor Matt Ashton, current Vice Chair of the Champs DCPH Board, will take over as Chair after the break. So, we wanted to start with something that we begin all of our Directors of Public Health Board meetings with, which is an expression of gratitude and thankfulness that we incorporate into our sessions. And we, at a recent collaborative event that we had, agreed that it was something that we should be promoting and making every opportunity to share good practice and gratitude together. So before we begin with the speakers, I'd like to invite you to do something that we do, and that is to share the good news and gratitude that you have. So if you could add something into the chat, any gratitude that you'd like to give to a colleague, either past or present, it might be someone who has inspired you in your career so far, and just pop those in the chat. I can see Matt has jumped straight in with gratitude for the public health family. We will keep an eye on those as they come in. Now, somebody has thanked me for my bow tie, which, whilst I appreciate, is it's nice to hear. It's unusual for me to dress formally. Gratitude to the Champ support team for pulling the event together. Gratitude for the physical activity system. Gratitude to the ex-director at St Helens from Sue Forster. A lot of gratitude for the team at Champs, in particular, picking out a few people for their support of the Altogether Active strategy. So lots going into the chat there. So thank you for taking part in this. It's so important to give thanks to our colleagues for their support. So without further ado, shall we get started? I'd like to introduce a short film we have made, which we feel sums up the impact the collaborative has had over the years. It's called We Celebrate Together, and I hope that you enjoy it.
We Celebrate Together, a poem about the Champs Public Health Collaborative, performed as a collaborative.
Our feature history began in Aintree back in March 2003, a vision set to improve wellbeing and reduce inequality.
To collaborate and work together to improve the public's health, partnering with key agencies who focus on helping someone else.
We fought hard to keep our system of working in this way, but setting sight and lighting bright, we came together to unite.
Across Merseyside and our Cheshire Plains, collaboration runs through our veins.
It's time to celebrate what we've all achieved. Who'd have thought that we'd exceed?
Smoking bans to Altogether Fair activity plans, Early Detect, Early Protect, a serious project that aims to affect.
Snack Right was our first behaviour change campaign. Replacing unhealthy foods was its aim.
Nudging families towards healthy eating, something encouraged to keep repeating.
Build Back Fairer is better than better, with community inspirers who become confidence spreaders.
Creating fair employment and good work for all, enabling young adults to maximise their abilities to stand strong and tall.
Inform place-based action plans local to you, using lived experience to craft the community view.
Making a difference with poverty truth. Renewed passion, drives and smiles is all the proof.
Winter Wellbeing championed the simple things to remind our communities what bugs can bring.
A PR success with an engaging impact, with schools and businesses who took note to react.
Bringing positive change to public health is a new kind of smarter public wealth.
Living happier, healthier, fulfilling lives for longer, our collaboratives makes our relationships stronger.
We must continue to calibrate and align resources to navigate the course we have set to co-create, to make a difference and captivate.
20 years experience, still committed, our motivation firm and steadfast, but working as a team together, it won't be our last.
It won't be our last.
It won't be our last.
I think we can all agree that there was a lot of really powerful messages in there and a real testament to the 20 years of work that's gone into this collaborative. And I'd like to invite our first speaker now, who I'm sure will be thrilled at having to follow that. But I would like to invite Dr. Vicky Dardamissis from the UK Health Security Agency to be our first speaker today.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for the opportunity to share some of our experiences during COVID with you all. It's been more than 3 years since the start of the pandemic, and this event is a fitting time to thank all of our colleagues on this call and across the wider health and public health community on behalf of UCSA for working tirelessly, not just on the front line, but also in the background to protect and care for our communities in Cheshire and Merseyside. The past 3 years have been the most challenging time we have ever faced in many decades, and we did learn a lot from the pandemic, some good, some less so. On the positive side, we quickly came together as a public health system across Cheshire and Merseyside to respond to the pandemic. And our commitment to partnership working, to solving difficult challenges together, was an inspiration. It showed us what we can do, what can be achieved with strong relationships built over many years. And when we work as one public health system and one health protection system. CHOMS has been absolutely instrumental over the 20 years of its existence, bringing together partners, providing a framework for developing relationships and system-wide leadership. And the pandemic has demonstrated that structures and processes alone are not sufficient without the foundation of strong relationships. And then there was the trust that local communities had in the public health advice given by DPHs, by directors of public health in Cheshire and Merseyside. Trust won over many years of hard work, dedication to address health inequalities and serve their communities. And time again, we saw during the pandemic that local people trusted the advice of local DPHs and local public health teams more than that of national politicians and national experts. And now to some of the more difficult experiences and lessons from the pandemic. Firstly and foremost, the immense impact on the health and well-being of our staff, affecting recruitment and retention to this day. Secondly, the importance of local decision-making. So many pandemic decisions were made at national level when we know that we collectively have the local knowledge and the local expertise to make local decisions based on what's best for our communities. And this is a lesson we must all share and escalate as a key message to those in authority. Thirdly, in future, we need to challenge mass non-pharmaceutical interventions such as lockdowns due to the differential impact on our communities. And we know we have the evidence how these mass interventions widened and exacerbated existing health inequalities, not just in Cheshire and Merseyside, across the Northwest. Finally, and fourthly, I want to mention care homes. Disproportionately, the COVID pandemic disproportionately affected residents and staff in care homes, and COVID exposed existing challenges within the social care system, and nothing appears to have changed. Lack of infection control, lack of recognition, shortage of staff, poor pay, no or limited sick pay for the workforce, the financial and the moral impact of the pandemic on care staff, destabilizing care homes and the care home sector. Finally, I'd like to close with another thank you. It's been an incredible experience and privilege working with so many people from so many organizations and teams with the sole purpose of protecting and keeping the public safe. Without you, the impact of the pandemic on our staff in Oxford and our communities in Cheshire and Merseyside would have been much bigger. I'm proud of what we achieved together. Let's build on that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think I would be right in saying on behalf of CHAMPS and all of my colleagues how much we have valued the strong working relationship that we had both before the pandemic across the sub-region that has only strengthened and built further through what has been such an incredibly difficult and challenging time. And I look forward to the continued strong and effective collaboration with the new Health Security Agency, of course, before the pandemic, it was the relationships we had with Public Health England. So thank you. That takes us on to our next speaker. So I would like to invite Jim McManus, who is the president of the Association of Directors of Public Health, to speak now. Whilst Jim is talking, if you have any questions that you would like to have raised with him, if you pop them in the chat during at the last 5 minutes of his section, we'll pull out some of those questions and put them to him. So just a warning for you there as well, Jim, that some questions may be coming. Thank you very much.
So no pressure then. Thank you. And folks, it's wonderful to be with you, not least because we come out of last year, which was a 175th anniversary celebration of Directors of Public Health, into this year, which is the 175th anniversary of the Public Health Act 1848. And as we know, the first DPH was in Liverpool, Matt's predecessor, and it's your 20th anniversary as a collaboration. So it's a year, I think, to look forward as well as look back. And I'm going to try and do that and discern some signs of the times. If I could have the next slide. And you're welcome to have these slides and use them in any way you like, by the way. If they're useful, use them. If not, don't. I think the next 2 to 3 years is going to bring a number of trends, one of which is the kind of microbial uncertainty of basically lots of microorganisms having a fight for dominance, and not quite sure who's going to win. But, you know, it's the fantasy league at the minute, isn't it, of is measles or monkeypox going to win the fight with COVID? Nobody knows. We're going to have fiscal challenges. We're still living with COVID. I was acutely aware when I gave evidence at the COVID inquiry last week that there were people living with long COVID in the gallery listening to my evidence, which I think should sober us. And you have to walk past the tapestries made by bereaved families, which should also sober us and remember this, that COVID isn't over. Cost of living squeezes for many, a huge amount of social unsafety as we other people. We seem to be being fed a false choice between what people are calling woke supremacy on one hand, which I call caring about and loving other human beings, and aggressive populism on the other, where people, and that does have a public health consequence, and it is a public health issue. The economic challenges are a huge issue. And we have an atmosphere where many people feel vulnerable, threatened, and uncertain. And just to add to the joy, I'll move to the next slide. So we have worsening health in a lot of people. Our life expectancy has stalled. As Michael Marmot says, the only people who had worse life expectancy changes in England in the last 2 years was the United States, but they're always worse. There's a continuing focus on the NHS as the main provider of health in the mindset of national politicians, which we all know it isn't. The policy zombies of let's just give people more pills or a fat injection seem to continue with us. And the idea that willpower remains the key to prevention. You know, either we've all lost so much willpower since the Second World War that we are all blancmanges, or this is a dead and zombie policy that we need to kill, but it won't die. There's been a huge breakdown of trust in politicians. And in spite of that, we have the rediscovery of community and collaboration and people moving to long-term thinking, actually, which are good signs. So if I can move to the next slide, those are big challenges. I'm not going to dwell on this, but we're also seeing quite a lot of change in our population. While the UK's population is growing, improvements in healthcare and lifestyles mean it's getting older and more people are living in a preventable disability and preventable poor health. And that's worse in the north than it is in the south. And there's also a social gradient. It's worse if you're poorer. If we can move to the next slide. And I'm rattling through this because I think you all know this. And you can see the life expectancy has stalled. So if we move to the next slide, also, thanks to life expectancy gains, the number of people living with multiple conditions is rising, and that makes demands of us as a society, as a health and care system, and about keeping people well. And it does feel like we're being hit with multiple waves of impact and a tsunami. So let's move to the next slide. Having just thoroughly depressed you all, let's skip that one because I think we've covered that one, and go to some issues. Let's also skip that one, sorry. There's a little book by a guy called Jean-Claude Larcher, which as yet has not been translated into English, where he writes a little theology for times of pandemic. And he says on page 7 that the pandemic has surprised, disoriented and disorganized all of the structures of our society in all of the countries of the world, and it shattered assumptions about science. You know, science isn't an exact science, who knew? And it shattered our realities. We could choose to see this as picking up the broken fragments of a hurting world, which it partly is, or we could choose to see this as a great opportunity for renewal and for bringing back values of public service in public health, which has been what energized the directors of public health and the chief medical officers from the beginning, and indeed clearly energizes all of you. You wouldn't be doing this but for the fact you're here to serve society and make a better world, would you? And I think this gives us an opportunity to put values and the virtue of service at the heart of everything we do. And that, for me, I think has got to be one of the big pillars. If we move to the next slide, we learned that with COVID, pandemics never come in single waves. And if you haven't read Singer on syndemics, multiple waves, do, because COVID has brought multiple waves of harm with it, including mental ill health and financial impact. The impact of the antisocial, hostile world that we feel now to be in at the minute will be multiple on many people, particularly those most marginalized and vulnerable in our society. And I do think we have to articulate the importance of valuing every human being because of the dignity of them, and actually articulating how we do that, and articulating how that is a health goal, to make every people feel that they can flourish and that they are valued. Because if we don't do that, we will harm people and it will cost us in many ways. If we move to the next slide. So how do we lead in this environment? And I'm trying to give as much time for questions as possible. I think there are ways of doing this, and these are the kind of roadmaps that I'm using. Firstly, identify the absolute core must-dos and work with others in the system to identify who can do what at national, regional and local levels. Now is not the time to be a public health person in isolation. Now, more than ever, is a time for a public health person to be part of a network or a gang or a supported group. Go back to your best skills, articulate with evidence and articulate what can be done about it. Articulate the science, articulate the art of what needs to change to build a healthier future. I often talk about using a French word called ressourcement, which is returning to the sources. And the sources of public health are those people who set up CHAMPS 20 years ago, and those people who set up public health 175 years ago. They understood the importance of evidence, action and service, and we will not go wrong as long as we continue that. I think get engaged with other system players and don't simplify the issues you've got. Explain the complex of issues we face and explain what system players can do about it. People now are looking for people to explain issues and what we can do. And the great thing about public health people is that you can understand evidence and complex evidence and translate it into English and translate it into action. And that is one of our USPs. If we move to the next slide. A few weeks ago, we had the 20th anniversary of a peer-led organisation run by people with HIV, for people with HIV, and people who are of faith. And there's a few of us who are invited to advise them, and I'm one of the people outside work who advises them, and they've done Public Health England funded some videos. And this organisation called Positive Faith has a fantastic mix of people of all genders, sexualities and races. And I was asked to explain, and they're all Christian, and I was asked to explain the science of peer support at an event where I was speaking alongside Laura Walters, the HIV physician. And I described it using the imagery from St. Matthew's Gospel of salt and light. Public health are the salt of the earth. In other words, you add the flavour and you bring a flavouring and you bring something that if people weren't there, you would miss it. So what is it that you do to salt a world that needs salting? Actually, quite a lot. It may not be seen, the importance of policy, for example, but it is there. You're also there, I think, to bring light, which is actually show what can be done to build a healthier society. And support groups, there's a lot of psychology around networks and support groups where they provide unseen flavouring, if you like, to people's lives and support that is vital. And they also provide clear direction and sometimes visible campaigning. And the best of peer support networks do that. And I look at you and I see you do that. You provide solidarity. When the chips are down and people are having a go at you, your common identity actually can provide significant psychological resilience in challenge. That is a significant, well-researched benefit of support groups and of peer networks. You can help to play to your strengths, you are stronger together, and you can understand and play the different aspects of a complex system in order to model them. Public health in future needs to be public health that is done together with people to change complex systems. And that will help you build and flex and learn different leadership styles as well. All of those, I think, are hugely important. So I'm going to come on to what I call my pillars for leadership and finish and answer some questions, which is my final slide. I was asked to give you 3 tips, and as usual with me, I've got 6. First of all, care for yourself as part of caring for others. You do need to care for yourselves in difficult times. Secondly, you need to rediscover the purpose of why you do what you do and articulate the hope. Because there is hope for a better world, and we need to be part of it. The third is use all the talents, use all the knowledge, the science and the art. This is what we're here for. And the fourth is never mind the year-on-yearness of so many of the systems. Think long-term, even if you can't tell people you're acting long-term. It is possible to think long-term. My 5th one is tell the narrative, the golden thread from describing the problem to describing the action and describing how we get to different, because people need that inspiration and they need that direction. And finally, there is only one acid test of public health leadership, and that's whether you create the conditions. And every single person on this call is a leader. Every single person. And the acid test is whether you create the conditions where other people feel they matter and where other people feel that their leadership matters and they can show it. And if you do that, we'll get through this. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And the one we don't get to, I'll try and answer in the chat.
Thank you, Jim. I think that was a really, really timely and helpful summary of where we're at and where we're going. And a couple of things really strongly resonated with me, particularly around the fact that it's the time to be part of a supportive group. And I think that's exactly what we have together in this virtual room is one of the most supportive groups, certainly, that I've ever worked with. The one of the last things you said around cultivating that environment in which people can be public health leaders, I think that's one of our most important and strongest positions to take all through the public health family, is creating that perfect environment for the best quality health for people is created. So there are a few questions that have come in, and I'm going to start working through them and see where we get to. I'll try and pick out ones that come out more than once if I can. But I think the first one that was raised was a question about whether you have any thoughts on how public health challenges the weaponisation of hate and othering.
Yes, I think there's three things we can do. One is we can actually articulate the harm it does to people's health, and the damage it does to societies, and the damage it does to social cohesion. And we know scientifically that the more you do that, the more you harm people, and the worse health you have, the worse it will be for the system, and the worse it will be for the economy. So I think we can make that evidential case. The second thing we can do is we can actually, in how we design and implement our services, design out hate and othering and design in inclusion. And I know that's challenging, but if you look at the work on monkeypox recently, we didn't cover ourselves in glory as a nation on monkeypox. I think some of the lessons we could have learned from COVID, we didn't learn very earlier on. And I think we stigmatized an awful lot of gay men too soon. So I think we need to be able to do that. And I think the third thing is we can articulate how we spread pro-social behavior. We know from science that pro-social behavior builds confidence, builds cohesion, reduces hate, and builds inclusion. The more we do that, and that is a public health challenge, the better we will be and the better our society will be. So our values, and we also are very good at countering misinformation and disinformation and pseudoscience. So we should bring all of those tools to the table in being very, very clear that we just have no truck with hate.
Thank you. The next question is, do you see multiple long-term conditions as an unintended consequence of people living longer?
I think there will be some people who, if you're purely instrumentalizing human beings in health and not seeing the person beyond the dally, might view it that way. My view is that we need to see human beings as people who will get long-term conditions, will become ill, but an effective governmental system is to enable them to thrive, make a positive contribution, and be as valued as members of society as possible. And therefore, we need to find a way of enabling people with multiple long-term, we need to find a way of preventing multiple long-term conditions. We need to find a way of helping people live with long-term conditions. And there is something about a human being is precious just because they are a human being. And I think our public health policy starts from there, because if you start seeing people with multiple long-term conditions as an unintended consequence, it's a slippery slope to seeing people with disabilities as a burden rather than an asset. And once you do that, you remove the great gift that disabled people are to us as a society in terms of their talents and their time and their riches. So I would react against the unintended consequence and say this is just part of life, and our health system and prevention system hasn't done the job it needs to do to help people live as healthily as possible for as long as possible.
Very well said. I wholeheartedly agree. The next question is, how do we use the fantastic community response from the COVID pandemic?
I think you have to give them something to do. I think one of the reasons why we got so many conspiracy theorists is because national government didn't keep faith with the residents in terms of either the regulations for COVID, nor did it keep faith in terms of actually making what we wanted clear, and people wanted direction. But there's so many people out there that want to serve and support and be kind. Harness it. Start a random kindness campaign. Start a campaign of pro-social behaviour. Get everybody to start a smile campaign. Get people volunteering and doing things that they can do because it's good for you. Harness your local voluntary organisations and your local civic and faith organisations to do something. If you do that, you could really harness the positive benefit, which far outweighs the noisy, angry, pained and hurt minority. And I think, one of my favourite authors said, you never know the good that a smile does. And just start anywhere and start harnessing it. and build a movement of people for better health. And you know, you lot in your part of the country are really good at that. Just think about what you have given the world in the last 100 years in terms of social movements.
Thank you. I think there's one last question that has come in, which is how can housing providers best engage with and support delivery of public health services, campaigns, etc.?
So I think if you're in a district council, and we're going to nick Dave Buck's thunder, read the King's Fund report on district councils and public health that's just come out. I think if you're not, go and sit down with your public health team. But perhaps Champs could organise something on how housing and public health can work together. What can you do in terms of really good planning? Can you plan an environmental infrastructure in new housing to be resistant to extremes of weather? Can you actually plan in decent homes? You know, you lot gave us some national public health models on healthy, warm homes funded by the NHS. How can you work together on things like mould, for example, at the minute? So I think it's sit down and talk and then work out what's doable and start from there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in directly for you, but I'm sure if any appear in the chat, you will be on your keyboard ready to answer. So thank you very much for an inspiring and really invigorating conversation about where we are, where we're going to, and the opportunities coming forward. Thank you very much, Jim. Greatly appreciated. So moving on to the next item that we have for you this afternoon. Throughout the session, we are going to be showing you a selection of videos that have been put together by partners across the local authority and other partners, and some of the achievements that they've had with those programs. We're having a few of them across the afternoon, with the first 5 minutes of those coming now.
Hi, I'm Laurie Hawthorne. I work for Cheshire East Council Public Health Improvement. I'm going to talk to you about the Suicide Prevention Action Plan. We put the action plan together this year following the launch of the Cheshire and Merseyside Suicide Prevention Strategy in November last year. So we held 3 workshops, one on prevention, intervention and postvention, all of which were well attended. We had over 50 attendees from the voluntary sector. We had counsellors, partners and mental health experts. From that, we collated the information and it helped design and develop our action plan. The action plan will be available on the Cheshire East website, and it also will sit underneath the Health and Wellbeing Board.
ADA stands for Addiction, Diversion, Disruption, Enforcement and Recovery. It's very much a wraparound approach or a whole system approach to support people that are in substance misuse and they need that support into treatment and recovery. Or looking at individuals that are potentially committing crimes due to their substance misuse, so looking at diversionary activity as well. We work with Merseyside Police, service providers across the city offering that treatment and recovery package, the prison services and probation. So it really is, I guess, that whole system approach to support those individuals who need it. We're now celebrating year 2 of ADA, and in that time we've engaged with an additional 2,500 people they're in treatment. We've delivered 440 interventions to vulnerable people. We've educated 199 young people, so that's more the preventative side, and we've delivered 742 out-of-court disposals. 340 of those individuals have entered structured treatment, so a lot of great successes there.
The Halton Healthy Schools programme is a multi-agency partnership offer based on a whole school approach to physical, social and emotional health and well-being. All Halton schools are invited to sign up and engage with the programme each year. This year we were delighted that 75% of schools engaged with the programme. To celebrate all of the work around health and wellbeing in schools, we host an annual celebration event where representatives from each healthy school are invited to attend. This year's theme was mental health and wellbeing. Schools had the opportunity to showcase some of their fantastic work. We had guest speakers, a marketplace where lots of agencies were able to promote their free offers to schools, and we were joined by the Mayor and Consort of Halton, who presented certificates to schools, and not forgetting the wake up shake up routine that got us all energised and smiling. The event was a fantastic way to bring schools together, to inspire one another, and to celebrate all of the amazing work in Halton.
I'm Esther from Knowsley Council. Between December and April last year, we ran a winter wellness programme to support those most at risk from food and fuel poverty or social isolation, and to be able to access warmth, hot meals and company. Community groups were invited to apply for funding of up to £5,000 to enhance their existing activities or start new ones that would create warm spaces for the whole community. The fund was massively oversubscribed, but the council managed to fund over 40 groups. These groups provided a mixture of games, social activities, physical activity sessions, arts and crafts, warm clothing, blankets, food on site and hampers to take away, hot water bottles, and information and signposting to other costs of living and mental health support. 26 groups were formally evaluated with over 500 separate events, more than 800 people, and 15,500 face-to-face interactions recorded. Facilitators described the support as life-changing for residents who they could see getting thinner and struggling more as the winter went on. We are planning to do a similar intervention this year to cover the whole winter period.
Hello, I'm Lisa James. I'm a public health researcher at Liverpool John Moores University. I've worked with CHAMPS over many years, and in 2015 I led a refreshed CHAMPS commissioned intelligence and evidence service, working alongside Matt Ashton and others in the system to deliver high quality research for the priorities across the public health teams in Cheshire and Merseyside. In 2016-2017, our work contributed to identifying evidence-based actions that could be taken forward in the Liverpool City region to tackle health and wellbeing among older populations, and in Cheshire and Warrington for issues across the life course. Over the next 5 years of delivering the service, we carried out a range of evaluations and evidence reviews on topics including worklessness, developing community resilience, an evaluation of the safe and well visits by the Fire and Rescue Service, and around cardiovascular disease prevention. During the pandemic, we shifted our work plans to focus on COVID-related priorities. We carried out a piece of work on the direct and indirect impacts of COVID-19 on health and wellbeing, and we did a qualitative evaluation of the integrated contact tracing system in Cheshire and Merseyside. On both sides, we gained shared, valuable learning from this collaborative model of working, and it continues to inform my work on bridging the research to practice gap in public health.
What a fantastic set of examples of bits of work being carried out across the public health system in Cheshire and Merseyside, and a real representation of the diversity of different areas that public health interacts with and has the opportunity to influence through its working, particularly where we can do that in collaboration. We'll have a couple more sessions of those through the rest of the afternoon to highlight some more great examples of collaborative working. But now I'd like to introduce a video address from Professor Kevin Fenton, the President of the Faculty of Public Health.
Hi everyone, I'm Professor Kevin Fenton, President of the Faculty of Public Health. Now, unfortunately, I can't be with you today in person, but I wanted to congratulate the CHAMPS Collaborative Network on 20 years of working together to deliver innovation and impact in public health. Now, partnership working is the bedrock of effective public health practice, and the CHAMPS network has gone from strength to strength since its early beginnings in the NHS as a public health network. Now, the Faculty of Public Health has always been a proud partner of CHAMPS, and as we look to future opportunities and tackle the current and future challenges in public health, we will continue to champion the work of this superb network. Now, at the faculty, we will continue to work with our members to advance and support the public health profession, supporting knowledge or practice and equitable public health policy to deliver better health for all. The faculty's new strategic focus areas for 2022 to 2025, developed in collaboration with our members across the United Kingdom and overseas, aim to support a resilient, diverse and inclusive public health workforce, one which is ready to meet the public health challenges of today and into the future. And we will work with our members to deliver effective system leadership to improve the health of the public across the UK and to act as an unequivocal and unrelenting champion for health and equity in all policies. And harnessing the collective knowledge of our membership, we will share learning and promote evidence-informed public health programs to deliver for local, regional and national populations. Now, as we deliver on these priorities, we will look to deepen our partnership working with organisations and networks such as CHAMPS and look forward to working together over the next 20 years in protecting and improving the public's health. Now, I've been asked to give one tip for future public health leaders, and that one tip would be to continue to invest in your leadership and development throughout your career, as you will continue to evolve, change and mature as a public health leader, and your learning is a critical part of your development. Thank you for all the vital work that you have done to continue to deliver for the health and well-being of populations and tackling inequalities. Congratulations on your work over the past 20 years, and I wish you all the best for your continued effectiveness, partnership working, and impact in the next 20 years. Thank you so much.
Some sound advice there in continuing to grow and develop as a public health leader, which, as we've heard from Jim, all of us are public health leaders. Everyone on this call has an opportunity to make a difference to improve people's health and well-being as part of this family. So the next thing we wanted to do was to give you some more of those really great examples of local practice with another few minutes of the local team videos.
One of the things I'm really proud of is our Be a Lover Not a Fighter campaign, a campaign to raise awareness around domestic abuse and a call to action to end domestic abuse in our communities. This is a campaign we did in each local authority and across Cheshire and Merseyside back in 2016. It had a lasting impact.
Hi, I'm Helen Armitage. I'm one of the public health consultants at Sefton Council. And the piece of work I want to celebrate and share today is Sefton's child poverty strategy. Like a lot of the important pieces of work that we're doing at the moment, this got off the ground actually during the pandemic, when we could really see the impacts of COVID-19, particularly on the lives of young people and particularly young people living in poverty. And with that in mind, we started developing stakeholder groups, looking at evidence, trying to work out what are the really specific things that we're seeing in Sefton. And through that, we developed our first draft of our strategy, which we launched at the end of last year. And we set ourselves, because this is quite a complicated topic, we set ourselves 3 quite complex, ambitious goals. The first of those was to limit the amount of time that children spend in poverty today, and to limit the amount of poverty that we see in Sefton. The second was to reduce the harm that comes from child poverty, and that's the harm to children's health chances and life chances. And the third really important one, and I think this is what sort of makes our strategy different and, as I say, very ambitious, is to reduce the chances of today's generation of children and young people from growing up and entering adulthood in continuing poverty. So all the way through this process, we've been really grateful for the support from CHAMPS, and the rest of the Marmot community as well in helping us develop the strategy. We were fortunate to be able to use some funding to do some academic research with families and children with lived experience of poverty here in Sefton, and that's really added to the richness of our understanding. So, as I say, we launched in December, and to simplify things a bit, we focused our changes on pockets, prospects and places. There was really great attendance at that. I think we had nearly 100 people in what was quite a small room, and that really showed us there was a commitment to really do some work on this area. Just last week, we followed that up with a half-day deep dive into the prospects theme. That was another brilliant day. We had expert speakers looking at different issues across the early part of children's life course, from kind of 0 to 18, 19, that kind of age. And we also had stallholders who came from our local VCF and explained about the work and support that they were offering in our local communities. And we had some really lengthy and involved discussions about what it takes to enable all of us to do poverty proofing in our local organisations. At the end of the day, there was a lot of energy had been expended, and everybody was suitably exhausted, but I think that really goes to show, as I say, the commitment that is there to making the strategy happen, making it a reality in Sefton.
Hi, my name is Catherine Fippen and I work in the public health team at Cheshire East Council. I led on the Cheshire East rollout of the Mouth Care Matters training for care homes, which has been rolled out across Cheshire and Merseyside in all the local authorities. In Cheshire East, we've completed 16 face-to-face sessions, training 128 mouth care champions across 29 settings. We provided all of the settings with sample packs for all the health products, such as 3-headed toothbrushes, and we've had really good feedback on those sample packs, feeling that they could be useful with their residents, and they didn't know about these different toothbrushes before the training. We've also had good feedback on the training itself, the 3-hour session, saying that they took some really valuable information away from it, and also had discussions around mouth care at their daily staff meetings.
Some more fantastic examples there. Closing out this first half, as we're going to move to a break in a moment, I've also been asked to share my top tips for future public health leaders. And I think I've would boil it down to value people, their experiences, their skills, their knowledge. Wherever those people are, it's so important that we place value in them. That's how we improve the health and well-being of our populations, and most importantly, preserve the health and well-being of each other within the public health team. We need each other to deliver what we deliver, and we need to value everybody that's part of that. And most importantly, value you. You are the person who is fantastic. You are wonderful. You can do incredible things. You just need to be confident and empowered to be able to do it. And I think it's so vital, especially as the world has got more and more busy and more chaotic, that we make space to prioritize our well-being, our health, and the incredible contribution that each of us is capable of making to the wider system. And lastly, and I think this is so important, we all need to be able to enjoy what we do. Public health is a great career. It is a place where you make such a difference to people's lives and well-being. And every day I enjoy what I do, and I hope that my team does. And most importantly, I hope that everybody in the public health family does. I realize that I've said most importantly several times, but everything that I've said is my top tips. So it's all the most important things to me. So with that in mind, I'm also the lead DPH for workforce development within CHAMPS, and I'd like to encourage you now to take every opportunity you can to look after your own well-being. I'm leading a new Cheshire and Merseyside group with a holistic approach to look at the well-being and development of our public health workforce. But now you can take some time for your own well-being and self-care by taking a 10-minute screen break and joining us back here at 3:05. Thank you very much, everybody, and I will be handing over to Professor Matt Ashton for the second half of the event.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Time for the second half of today's celebration event. My name's Matthew Ashton, and I'm the Director of Public Health for Liverpool, and also have the honour and privilege of being the Vice Chair of the Champs Public Health Collaborative. Couple of reflections from me, first of all. A wonderful first half, expertly managed by Matt and his bow tie. Unfortunately, I don't have a bow tie. I've got my red tie on, if that helps, but I'll do my best without a bow tie and see where we get to. What I loved about the first half of the session was the passion with which people spoke to, and I think that really shows the amount of commitment and dedication we've got in the public health family, which we shouldn't forget about. So 20 years ago we started, and I was trying to think about when my first involvement in Champs was, and I started in Knowsley in 2005, and my Director of Public Health was Diana Forrest at the time, my mentor, the person who taught me most about public health, alongside one other person who perhaps I'll mention later. And Diana always encouraged me to get heavily involved in Champs. It wasn't something I really understood what it was. It took me a bit of time to understand the value of it. What I felt was being surrounded by these very intelligent directors of public health who had a clear vision about what they wanted to do, and desperately wanting actually to be part of that. Over the last 18 years or so, I've been fortunate enough to be involved in many elements of it. Things that stand out for me include things like the mythodrama that we did at Chester Racecourse, or the Lover Not a Fighter campaign, which we did in 2015, which you might have seen mentioned earlier, and also some of the strategic planning sessions that we've had as Directors of Public Health, where we've had the incredible Tom Hennell come and present reams of data to us and tell us what we need to focus on to make a difference. And most of all, though, the last couple of years through COVID has been incredibly pressurized, as Vicky was talking about at the start, but a sense of being in it together and having support in the system to do what we need to do was fantastic. And I think Champs, that's one of the key kind of successes of Champs. We have an amazing Champs support team led by Dawn, but amazing people throughout the support team, and we should always say thank you to them for the work that they do. And I always remember Dawn's challenge to me when we say, oh, Champs needs to do this, and Dawn always says to me, we are the collaborative. You guys are the collaborative. This is all of us. It's not just a small number of people in the centre. It's everybody working together on this. And I think that's a really strong message for us all. Some of the local videos that we've just seen in that first half really show how proud we are of some of the work we do at a local level. So the suicide prevention action planning work, the ADA work, healthy schools in Halton, which I'm determined to rob and put back in place in Liverpool, the winter wellness stuff in Knowsley, the intelligence service that we had with Liverpool John Moores, which really helped inform our practice, the fantastic work that Sefton are doing on child poverty, the Mouthcare Matters work in Cheshire East, and there's many, many more examples. And I think just helpful to remind us of the quality and breadth of the work that the public health family cover in Cheshire and Merseyside. And that's a really good message and opportunity for me to introduce Andrew Lewis, my chief exec for Liverpool, my new chief exec, but not new to public health. Used to work in Cheshire, West and Chester, so had Ian as his DPH, and hopefully Andrew already understands the value of public health. I know that he's a supporter of us and what we're trying to do, and as lead chief exec across Cheshire and Merseyside for health and care, I think he's got a key role in advocating for some of the public health priorities we've got. So delighted, Andrew, to be able to introduce you for the next 10 minutes or so to give your reflections on the public health response to COVID and what we've learned, and then an opportunity for people to put questions in the chat, which hopefully Andrew will have a chance to respond to at the end. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, Matt. Hopefully you can hear me well. I'm sorry I wasn't able to listen into most of the rest of your session so far, but just picking up the summary from Matt there as well. Just absolutely fantastic get together. And happy birthday to Champs. 20 years is quite an achievement. There aren't, I think, many of these sort of regional professional networks that can demonstrate the track record that you have over the last 20 years. And my remarks, I was asked to say a little bit about COVID, not in a backward-looking way, but to describe some of the things maybe that I learned from working with Champs across Cheshire and Merseyside during that period, and maybe some of the reflections that has given rise to for the challenges ahead, which are obviously going to be very different from those that we experienced during the COVID pandemic response. So first of all, happy birthday, Champs. Just to endorse the points that were being made there by Matt, I think this is a collaborative that has really come of age over that period. I guess you have to be 21, don't you, to properly come of age, but at 20 we'll give you the coming of age. During that last 20 years, I guess it's the last 10, isn't it, where public health was a fully integrated part of local government. So that subdivides the 20 years of Champs somewhat, and it's an equal celebration, I think, that public health is now. It's now just over 10 years since the 2012 Act, and I think it was shortly after that it was implemented, bringing public health within the local government family, or should I say bringing it back within the local government family, because of course local government has a very proud history dating back, I think, Matt will correct me on the history, but certainly well back into that Victorian era and the early Factory Acts and the work that local government did to absolutely transform the life chances of the population as part of local government during the Victorian era. And I mentioned that, I said I wouldn't look backwards, and then I've gone and looked back 200 years, but I think that sort of spirit of working not in isolation as public health professionals, but as part of a wider local government response is really what delivers really profound transformational change in the world of public health. And COVID demonstrated that, absolutely, that you were working very much in a leadership role, that directors of public health right across the country. It's good to see Jim on the call, absolutely at both a national and local regional level, providing that leadership, that professional leadership that we needed at one of the most challenging times facing our nation. And you did it by joining up across local government and using the fact that you were local government to bring together and to really inspire a collective effort that covered pretty much every function of the public sector. It's been good to hear. I've been listening into some of the input that is being made by Jim and by the LGA into the COVID inquiry. And it's a really good reminder of both the sort of ups and downs that we experienced in that time. The ups were all about when we were trusted, when we were given really critical tasks to do, whether that was supporting care homes or providing financial support to communities or to businesses, whether it was delivering in partnership with the NHS, the track and trace system and the community testing regime, or ultimately the vaccine programme. Local government was right at the heart of that. And I suppose let's not, as we look forward at different challenges ahead, let's not lose sight of the power of that collaboration. Collaboration between public health teams that you're celebrating today, but collaboration between public health and other professionals working in the public sector at local level, making a difference, because really that's what saved lives during the COVID response. I think at the early days when public health came into local government, there was a bit of a perception that it was a silo. That was reflected in the ring fencing of funding for public health, which was done for a good reason and still persists. But increasingly, that's become an irrelevant ring fence because you become a full core part of local government. The COVID, I think, pushed public health into the mainstream of local government, and I hope has encouraged public health professionals to see the benefit of being part of that integrated local government family. Sometimes it is nice to be in the ivory tower of public health, and sometimes it can feel a bit like that. But actually the difference you make and the positive transformation you want to make to society is only possible when you join up. As I say, we're celebrating today the joining up across the region of Cheshire and Merseyside, but the COVID response was also about joining up across different professionals working on the ground in both central, regional and local government. I think you bring a huge amount as professionals into that network as well. So the other big thing that we sort of learned to be comfortable with during COVID was the emphasis on data, the use of data. And of course, that wasn't just data within a closed profession. Public health data became the stuff of conversations in pubs and cafes. You know, it became graphs were tweeted and shared on Facebook. It became commentary on the state of the national response. And again, I wonder if that is something that we can really capture for the future. So that emphasis on measuring and understanding the relative performance of different communities, the challenges of inequalities that come out of the data very starkly. Let's not lose that emphasis on the public engagement with data, which manifests so strongly in COVID. It's a really important sort of public education role that we play, but it also mobilizes change, because when people realize quite what the sort of stark inequalities are that data demonstrates, it does mobilize action. So that emphasis on collaboration, that emphasis on data, these are critically important. And as we look ahead, I said we would try and look ahead rather than backwards. We're not going to have the benefit, if that's not the wrong word to use, of a national focus that we had in the pandemic. It's a much more contestable environment. The political choices are going to be even more stark going forward than they were during the emergency response. When you're dealing with issues like preventative services, early intervention, mental health intervention, societal challenges, lifestyle issues, questions of personal conduct and how we come together as a society, and the fundamental choices about what sort of society we want, whether we're prepared to live with the inequalities in public health, and if not, what we're willing to do to address them. These are even more complex issues to resolve than we experienced during COVID. We can learn a lot, I think, from some of the approaches that we took, from this collaboration, from the emphasis on data and evidence, and the importance of winning the hearts and minds of the public, but applying those lessons in the much more complex world of health inequalities. I think that's the challenge for the next 20 years of CHAMPS. And when we come together to celebrate 40 years of CHAMPS, we can point to amazing successes in this region for delivering on some of those health inequality challenges, then I think we will have earned that anniversary. So happy birthday once again. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you. I've recently taken up this role of lead chief executive for health on behalf of the Liverpool City region, appreciating we also operate with our colleagues in Cheshire, and maybe the fact I, until 6 weeks ago, was working as part of the Cheshire team will help us to bring all that together as well. But I'm really proud to have been asked to take on this role, and I intend to be an absolute champion of CHAMPS for the next period of your history. So thanks once again for inviting me, and best wishes for the rest of the conference. I think, Matt, I was asked to just hang on for a bit in case there are any questions or comments, and I look forward to joining in some of the later sessions as well.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. We've just got a couple of questions if you're okay to have a go, and appreciate kind of new into that leadership role. But I guess for me, first of all, if that's okay, how do you think the chief execs view directors of public health and their teams now, and what more would chief execs want us to do to support you in your work? Sorry.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I wouldn't claim to speak for every council. We'll all have our individual priorities, of course. One thing I will reflect on is one of my first meetings as part of the Liverpool City Region partnership was to hear about the progress Champs is making, and the goodwill around the table, I think, was very, very strong, very powerful. Actually, I think we've as chief executives of councils, we've gone through a learning experience over the last few years to appreciate what we have in the capacity from our public health colleagues. And we're not going to forget that all those of us who experienced the trauma of going through the COVID response will have learned to appreciate the public health teams within our organisation, and we want to make good use of that for dealing with some of the day-to-day challenges we face as a community. So I think that's, I mean, my response, Matt, is to ask you to carry on doing what you're doing, to sort of become the push the boundaries, I think, in terms of our response, but to do that in a way that recognises the wider responsibilities that you have as local government officers.
Thank you, Andrew. That's really powerful. We've got another question in the chat, which is kind of a bit of a follow-on. So if you were able, it's a bit of an unfair question, to be honest, Andrew, but I'm going to ask it anyway and risk the repercussions later. If you were able to identify a couple of public health priorities, where would you see them at the moment?
So thanks, Matt. I mean, I suppose we are still living in the shadow of COVID, and listening in as I have been to some of the input into the COVID review, I do think that sort of health protection role we can't lose sight of. We have to reinforce. We weren't prepared adequately for COVID, either at national or local level, and we know that as a country, and we're not we're not isolated from the wider pressures that we face across the planet, essentially on potential future resilience challenges. So I think that health protection role needs to remain high up the agenda for Champs. And then I think the other big priority is the underlying health inequalities facing our community, and I suppose speaking particularly from Liverpool, where those are very the consequences of that are very stark for our communities. Issues of extreme poverty very much present, as they are in many other councils in this region. All councils actually experience elements of that, and recognising that although we have in the past often focused on economic inequalities, it's the health inequalities that impact on people's lives in a very fundamental way. So it's not a single priority in terms of I'm not going to answer by saying it's about sugar or smoking, because actually it's about the social consequences of health inequalities in the round. And I think that analysis of the analysis that we get from Marmot and the people who've been applying Marmot principles to our local challenges is it's the highest priority.
Thank you, Andrew. That's great, and thank you for your support. And it sounds like we've got a public health champion in Chief Exec's world already. So thank you for that support. Right, colleagues, we're going to move on now. A couple of minutes behind. So the third instalment of our local area videos.
Hello, I'm Professor Martin O'Flaherty. I'm the Health Department, Public Health Policy and Systems at the University of Liverpool, and we are happy to celebrate with you 20 years of long-standing collaborations across public health in the region. I think the challenging years ahead need a robust public health voice as we recover from the multiple crises: pandemic recovery, cost of living crisis, the increasing impact of inequalities in our society. We need to be a voice, a strong public health voice, and we want to be that voice. And we know that Champs is that voice. People in my department understand the importance, the value, and the urgency of improving health for everybody in our communities. And for that, they work very hard, creatively, enthusiastically, and collaboratively to discover these new solutions through excellent research. And we do research in social determinants of health, food policy, energy and pollution, global health, and health systems research. So it's a broad portfolio of collaborations as well through the Arc Northwest, through the WHO Collaborative Center for Research on Social Determinants of Health, and in the Center of Humanities for Humanities in Health, Medicine, and Technology. So we celebrate 20 years of incredible progress in public health, in being this loud voice that we need, and we hope that the next 20 years, my department and CHAMPS can continue to build and be those voices that are so desperately needed by our communities. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sue Cumming, Head of Behavioural Insights and Change from Liverpool Public Health. Last year we worked very strongly with CHAMPS over our suicide prevention campaign, Reach Out Liverpool. The campaign co-created with people with lived experience of suicide. We had great engagement with over 40,000 people visiting our website, over 2,500 people completing the Zero Suicide Alliance training on the back of the campaign, and we tracked 52 calls to the crisis line. Building on CHAMP's Kind to Your Mind mental health campaign, Liverpool produced Kind to Your Mind Liverpool. From this, we've seen a 20% increase in life room referrals. We're also currently working on past campaigns which we've shared across Cheshire and Merseyside, and we're excited to share these again. Working on our Save Kids from Sugar campaign, which names and shames branded drinks, breakfast cereals and yogurts, and also our alcohol reduction campaign, Drink Less, Feel Good. Lots to be proud of and lots to share. Thank you very much for listening.
This last year has been a real tough one. We've all been impacted by the cost of living, but sadly some of our communities have been hit even harder than others. My independent report focuses on how our residents and communities have responded to the unaffordable rising costs of food and keeping warm, which are all the basics we need to have a better health. I have seen some amazing local schemes and communities coming together to tackle these challenges. And although this is my report as your Director of Public Health, this is about showing the efforts of the whole community over the past year and the challenges we have all had to overcome. The Council declared a poverty emergency for the borough in 2020, and since then extensive engagement has taken place to co-produce our Fairer Future strategy. This sets out an ambitious 10-year plan to reduce the number of people in the borough experiencing poverty and financial hardship. I am so grateful to all of our community inspirers who have shared their experiences of poverty with us. Their leadership, voice and expertise is helping us to better our society.
We need to show the true life of poverty, not the lives that people over the years have been taught to believe is poverty. And the council have made amazing changes. Even just getting the people with lived experience involved is a huge step. And the fact that they're taking on board what we're saying and helping us to make those changes, I think every council can learn from us.
Providing safe, warm spaces for people to come together has been a priority for Cheshire West and Chester, with our local communities and services coming together to set up warm spaces.
Gets me out the house, I meet new people around me, lots of arts and craft and stuff to do in there. Yeah, it's a good little break up of the afternoon. Before this, I was sitting at home, twiddling my fingers. This place, it gets you out, gives you something to look forward to in the week. You try the lovely recipes that they have every week, and it's nice to look forward to.
We're offering a warm hub experience to customers. You've got the daily newspapers, you can come and sit down, have a cup of tea, have a read of the newspapers, have a chat, and maybe that's all you need.
Libraries are so important as they offer a free service to any member of the community, so it doesn't matter whether you're a young child, early years, to someone who's older in the community. We support everyone.
more fantastic local examples of the difference public health teams make every single day. Well done, everyone. Gives me great pleasure now to introduce David Buck, our next speaker, Senior Fellow for Public Health and Health Inequalities at the King's Fund. Over to you, David.
Thanks very much, Matt, and thank you very much. I've been here since not the start of Champs. I think I've been with you for some time, and I've been delighted to work with you the last year or two, including with my colleague Dirk Dougal at the King's Fund. So I was also asked to say a few words about the future of public health, and I should say that none of us actually got together and said, you know, how do all our contributions compare? But I think what I'm going to say very much reinforces and connects to a lot of what others have already mentioned. So I had some quick thoughts about thoughts on the direction of travel really for public health. So just from the King's Fund sort of like perspective, so a national, regional, local perspective. So hopefully these will be of some interest, and then come back to that. What does that mean for you as public health leaders, whatever your job titles are? Because I know there's a huge range of people on this call, and that's really powerful sort of testament really to what Champs is, and that point about partnership across different sectors, different people, different contributions. Next slide, please. So very briefly, I think it's actually always good to look back. The crystal balls are notoriously cloudy at best. So first off, I'm going to say, what did I think back 10 years ago, actually, on some of these questions? So I'm not particularly reliable soothsayer of the future, but it's always good to look back. And some of the things we were thinking then are obviously very relevant now. And then look forward a little bit into the medium term, not so much into the long term, but into the medium term about things that we see coming over the horizon, and again, many of which have already been mentioned. And what does that mean, I think, for you, and what I can actually see that is that how you respond already. So next one, please. So back in 2013, I was still in the King's Fund. I had worked in central government, and we had, those of you who recall, and we've heard about this, the reforms at that stage, the move into local government for many public health functions, by no means all public health functions, and obviously is a really critical services and a focus on public health in the NHS and elsewhere too. But back in 2013, we had to go at what do we think of what's coming and the plans on the public health reforms, in particular in England. Next one, please. So I thought I'd have a look back into the archives. So I actually talked about this 9th of July 2012, so more than 10 years ago. So if any of you recall the documents at that time, the visions of the new coalition government, it wasn't new at that point, but around what it wanted to achieve for public health. And our view at the fund, my view, was that actually there was a strong commitment to public health and action to reduce inequalities in health in particular. And that was centre stage both nationally and locally. Quite a mature approach from government about understanding where responsibility for public health lies, and that was reflected in some of the shift of functions back into local government, in particular around the wider social economic context, and particularly that focus on supporting local government, the levers that it has control over or certainly influence over. So we were pretty sort of positive about the vision, but we still thought there was quite a lot of work to do on the overall coherence of those reforms, and in particular the bottom right. I'm not going to go into detail on this stuff, but there was a sense about had the reforms got to the logical end point. We were coming from a system which was mostly service focused, non-ring fenced, had varied accountability, and not particularly strong on health outcomes. I'm not just talking about the public health system, but the broader health and care system. And what that time, where we thought we were moving broadly, if you can summarize the complexity in one image, which of course you can't, was a recognition of the importance of health protection, designated services, a public health outcomes framework, so a bigger focus on outcomes and transparency on outcomes. Returning to Andrew's point about the importance of information, the transparency of information, really welcome the public health outcomes framework, ring fence funding, but still varied accountability and particularly weak for outcomes. And at that stage, thought where might we be heading? maybe we're heading into a future. This may be a halfway house, not really the logical endpoint for a public health vision for a system. Maybe we're moving into the future with fewer designated services, a much stronger focus on local priorities, more freedom over budgets, and perhaps in return for stronger accountability and a stronger outcomes focus. So those were some thoughts about the public health system. It'd be really interesting to think about any thoughts from yourselves in response to what I'm going to say. Next slide, please. But there was some stuff missing, clearly. At that stage, I don't know whether people remember, there was a particularly interesting paper by Martin McKee and colleagues, I'm not sure that you won't remember. I think some of you weren't born then, I think I saw in the chat some time ago, that actually the evidence is pretty strong about social welfare programs, social welfare spending in health, and this was a particularly interesting piece across OECD countries. And we questioned, where is this being discussed and acted on in government? So at that point, we thought, actually, it's a good start, but we need more. We need, at national level, we need a stronger focus on health impact assessment, driving activity and decisions, and the SCPH. Many of you get points when remembering what that means, was the subcommittee on public health. There was a national subcommittee on public health, and that might be a place where you might bring together some cross-government coordination. We wanted Public Health England, again, a very new body at that point, to be fierce in challenging national government policy when appropriate, as well as supporting behind the scenes. An NHS that fully understands its role as an economic entity, local authority that leaves existing services for health and well-being, and a stronger, more accountable system overall for outcomes. Now, I think we got some of that. I think, actually, we've seen the strength of local authorities. We did a piece of work 2 or 3 years ago, just before COVID, looking at the impact of the local government public health reforms, but we didn't get all of that, clearly. But nonetheless, so a little bit of a look back before I look forward, and a caution to looking forward, because we don't always predict what's going to happen. I didn't predict COVID or a big pandemic. Not many people did. Some people did predict it, but I certainly didn't do. So before we look forward, it's always worth looking back. So I still think there's unfinished business on public health reforms, and some of that will happen almost in place, as Andrew was saying, around the ring fence. What does a ring fence mean in a very well run place with public health at its heart? It's less important and less meaningful perhaps in Liverpool than it is in other places. Next slide, please. And I will motor through, sorry. So here's my turn at the crystal ball, and it will look quite similar, I think, to some of the things you've already seen. So there's a question here: do fools seldom differ, or do great minds think alike? I'll let you be the judge of that. Next slide. So clearly we've heard this in the last video in particular. The cost of living and poverty crisis are really important. They're going to stick with us for a long period. And I think there's a distinction between the two as well. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation, I think, are very good at this. And again, it's too simplistic, but we have people in enduring poverty who are sinking deeper into enduring poverty. There's a group in our society in each of your places and the region itself who are just sinking deeper and deeper. There's a group, a bigger group probably, which is on tipping into poverty, perhaps for the first time, the experience of poverty for the first time, and are not used to dealing with it. And there's a third group, which is the population at large, who are suffering from inflation, and many people's memories of inflation. They don't have memories of inflation and the impact on their decisions, and the impact on their finances, and the impact on their health. So when we talk about cost of living and poverty, I think it's important to be clear that we have different groups and there are different aspects of that. And are we clear enough about that in terms of our policy making and our practice in future? And are we slipping back into stagflation, a 1970s phrase? Is an open question. I don't think we know, but there is a difference to where we've been to before too. Looking at the past is always helpful for the future, if not a direct guide. In the 1970s and 80s, when we last had sort of like big inflation, unemployment was really high. At the moment, generally unemployment is low. That tells you that we've got, and you will know this better than I, we have different people slipping into poverty than perhaps we did in the past. We have people in work slipping into poverty because they can't afford to pay their bills. So this is poverty is a working crisis as well as a non-working crisis. And we also increasingly know, so there's a big question about that. So it's a big question I don't think is answered yet. And it'd be great to pick this up actually with people beyond this if you are addressing this. There certainly isn't at a national level. I don't think, how is poverty going to change the shape and size of health and care demand over the medium term? What is that going to look like? And cost of living. Some of the cost of living crisis will be hopefully relatively temporary. So there may be some temporary effects. There'll be some long-term effects. I don't see much focus on that nationally about really modelling or understanding that. So we're hoping to contribute to that missing gap. But I'd be really keen to hear more from you whether you think this is something that is missing. But I think that's a really critical big question, and it's great that this has come up in the conversation today. The second thing, I think, there's a bigger recognition around the health and care system that the health and care system has poverty and cost of living issues, of course, in its health and care staff too. So people around this room will be probably certainly suffering cost of living crisis, and some of you will be suffering from poverty, as well as all the people you work with who are supplying and working and delivering health and care services. The chart on the left is a really important one from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation too, a year or two ago now, but saying actually the health and care workforce is one of the most at-risk workforces, particularly the social care workforces, for poverty. So how are we responding to this within our own control to some extent? So poverty and its complexity and its cost of living and its long-standingness is going to stick with us over time into the medium term. Are we prepared to really look at that? It's great to see some of the videos on child poverty, for instance. So yes is the answer in some cases, but there are really big questions that I don't think we really know the answer to. Next slide, please. I need to move up, keep going. So I think absolutely right what people said about COVID. We're at the beginning of responding to COVID. The horrible graph on the left was again a little bit out of use, but we are starting to see the impacts of both COVID and the policy response to COVID in terms of people's behaviours, both at population level and at particularly for most vulnerable populations. So there's a big question about to what extent is this going to stick again in the population, so that there are some longer term direct effects around people's behaviour because of the COVID experience and the policy response. How sticky are those is a really big question, and how sticky for who? And I think that's going to be really important. But also, as we've heard, the indirect longer term effects. If you look back at previous pandemics or similar things, and fortunately, at least in the developed world, the COVID has not been as significant as things like the Black Death, which killed a third of the population in Europe and led to the end of, anyone who knows their history, led to the end of feudalism and a huge hundreds of years of history came into being because of the Black Death in Europe, in Europe, and whole societies were changed for all sorts of reasons. COVID is fortunately not the Black Death, but it's certainly accelerated technological and cultural changes. We're all sitting here around screens. We may have been doing that before COVID, but now it's normality. That changes how we relate to each other, opens lots of doors, closes lots of others. I'm far less physically active than I used to be, and I wasn't that physically active then. So it's changing lots of technological and cultural change. It's clearly shone a light on all sorts of inequalities, of which you know more than most people. It also demonstrated how effective coordinated human action can be in response. We need to congratulate ourselves, and you have rightly done so, about the response to COVID in Cheshire and Merseyside. You need to be congratulated. You need to keep patting yourselves on the back. And thank you, all of you, for your contributions and sticking to what was right. And I just really want to sort of thank you so much. And we did a piece of work on COVID and the roles of directors of public health and their teams, and it was a real privilege to do so and help to tell some of your story. But we know that less devastating pandemics have long tails of relative economic impacts for 20 years or more. So we're going to be dealing with COVID for at least 20 years, probably in various aspects. So that, and I think you've already clocked that this is, it might have been a pandemic, but it's got a very long tail in all sorts of ways. Next slide, please. And I will speed up, keep saying that. I'm being good. And now the positive, some positive stuff. So as the King's Fund, obviously we take part in various debates, and I've got national versus regional versus local, and it should be national and regional and local. So I think there's some positive things going on at the moment. I don't know whether they're going to stick, but we're seeing actually quite a lot of consensus around as we move into election season from centre right and centre left around what's needed in terms of policy, what's needed in terms of a much stronger focus on and conversations about prevention than perhaps we've seen in previous election cycles at national level. So we've got Patricia Hewitt here. Some of you will know about the Hewitt Review. She's a Labour former Secretary of State. We've got Lord James Bethell here, is a Conservative peer. They're basically on the same page in terms of what they're asking for. Doesn't matter, you can't put much, you know, the specifics might be slightly different, but everybody is talking about various things. And this comes from various routes. There's a prevention inquiry going on at the moment. I'm a little bit engaged in that. We've obviously heard about the COVID inquiry. Kevin and Jim were part of that. We've got health missions bubbling up. The Labour mission for a better Britain is really interesting, starting to flesh things out, particularly the role of regions. Given you are a regional body, I think the role of regions is going to become more important again in future. And critically, from a health think tank guy, non-health think tanks are talking about prevention in a very constructive way and a very clever way and a very bright way around what that means at national, regional, and local level. That's really critical because health think tanks will talk about this stuff, but the critical thing is influencers who are not health think tanks talking about some other things. So I think at the moment there's a bit of a consensus that we have to keep prevention, we have to keep public health on the agenda running up to an election. And so the role of an organisation like mine and people like me is to help that happen, help try and push that. I'll be honest with you too, on the money, there's lots of great conversation. There's not much conversation about the money. So we're always going to be short of money. You are brilliant at making do with less money than we would all like, because of your partnership, because of your collaboration, because of your influence wherever you operate. And I think we've also, and do move me on that if we're slipping, but I think that as someone from the King's Fund, you expect me to mention integration. The critical thing about integration is we focus on what it's really for rather than just the technical aspects of it, and we focus on the technical system aspects of it for quite a long time. The health and care system, the integration, the real prize in integration is the health and care system integrating beyond itself, being part of other people's games, being part of other people's plans, rather than just focusing on itself and just trying to bring other people into itself. I think the real prize is how can we ensure the health and care system integrates well and learns from and supports everybody else working on the wider determinants of health, everybody else working around health behaviours and communities themselves. And that's the real prize. And you guys in public health are critical to that, to making that case, to help make that happen, to keep banging on about and show the benefits of that. And if you do that, we're going to be in a much better position than we have been. And finally, it was great that we talked about multi-morbidity earlier, because again, around integration, we mustn't forget the elephant in the room, multi-morbidity in our populations. And sometimes we, again, and I'm thinking about my own organisation here, overemphasise the system integration. And actually, why are we doing it? Have we forgotten why we are pursuing integration as a policy? It's about prevention, mitigating, reducing the impact of multi-morbidity in our populations. Next slide, then I'm really there, don't worry. A wild card, I think, and I won't belabor this, I think there's really interesting stuff going on in the health and care system. Forever, we've had predictions of technological revolutions in health and care. I've seen loads of them, you will have seen more. But essentially, health and care system has been a very personal and a very care-focused thing. Whatever the technological innovations, it helps us to focus more on care. There's a real question in my mind, maybe in the next 5, 10, 15 years, about is that relationship actually possibly likely to change in a way that it hasn't to date? How much can really be delivered virtually? And therefore, what's the boundary of a national, even I'm not even talking about local or a regional health and care system, what's the boundary of a national health and care system when talent and knowledge can be anywhere in the world and it can be on tap? And we know that we can operate global networks of operating rooms and surgeons, certainly the technical aspects of certain levels of care. That raises all sorts of ethical questions, all sorts of possibilities about what is the boundary of a health and care system. We're going to have to face that and plan for that in the future. In my vision, that's the wild card. What
David, I think we're going to have to close there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The final point, final slide, Matt. Just keep going. Sorry, Matt. All of this comes back to you on, and I think it just re-emphasizes what others have said, partnership, a deep understanding of place. Pace is going to get even quicker, but your persistence is critical. You can be very strategic and you are also great at taking opportunities. So all this comes down to in what you're already doing. Stay true, stay flexible, stay relevant. It's an imperfect world, but you are making a difference to it and continue to do so. Sorry, Matt. Sorry, everybody.
David, thank you so much, and absolutely loads to get our teeth into there. And we will absolutely take those as your tips: staying true, staying flexible, staying relevant. We don't have a lot of time for questions, so very quickly from me, if I may. Do you think national government is starting now to appreciate the value of local directors of public health and local public health teams? And then a question in the chat about, which you've kind of partly answered, I think, in the presentation. What would be your top 3 actions for public health across Cheshire and Merseyside in the next couple of years?
So I do think nationally, yes. I think when I say national, I probably mean in some of the political debate. I think obviously we've had Kevin, who's, and we have colleagues from OHID here. I think there's a challenge around the role. I'll be absolutely honest with you. How does OHID be impactful in when it's when it's a part of the DHSC? And how can we maximise the impact of OHID's expertise nationally and influence nationally? I think there's a big question there and a big challenge. How do we get that expertise, allow that expertise to thrive and influence? But I think when we get to an election, whoever wins the election, broadly speaking, I think there will be a re-energising of what can we do nationally. So I guess my hope is that between now and the election, that expertise is protected and is ready to fire when we get to a next election. Obviously, currently the political times, we're in all sorts of uncertainty. Once we get to an election, hopefully with whatever the result is, with a clear result, we need to protect that expertise and ready to go. And this is why the impact of the non-health influencers on politicians is so important. And actually, there's a lot of consensus there. What's the second question, Matt? Three things.
Yeah, but you've only got time for one now.
I think your point, the point about your collaboration, your partnership, and take the strengths of each other, support each other. You are so powerful together, and you are so adaptive, and you are so insightful. So take the strength from yourselves and keep doing what you're doing. Whatever the things out externally, and be adaptive and flexible. And that's what I see from Champs. So congratulations again.
David, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And thank you and the King's Fund for your ongoing support. Great stuff. Looking forward to carrying on working with you in the future. Colleagues, we're rapidly moving towards the end of today's session. Just a couple of things to do before we close. And I've been given the job of trying to sum up the last 2 hours, which I think, frankly, is an almost impossible task. So thank you, Tracy, for giving me that. I'm going to try and draw out a few points that I've written down as we've been going along from our different speakers, but I'm sure you'll all have your thoughts as well. And in a moment, we're going to be doing a Mentimeter session where we're looking for your feedback, your thoughts about the Champs Collaborative, and even about some of the things you've heard about today. But starting off with Vicky at the top of the session, Vicky talked about the value of partnership working, trust at a local level, and being really proud of what we've achieved over the last couple of years. There's definitely something in there about capturing the learning as well. Jim talked about it being a year to look forward as well as a year to look back, and gave us some fantastic tips about the answers lying in leadership, identifying our priorities and our key partners, articulating the harm with data, evidence, and the art of the possible, engaging the system, acknowledging and responding to the complexity and the value of networks and support groups, and building a movement. Jim mentioned right at the end, building a movement. Kevin talked about innovation and impact, and partnership working being the bedrock of effective public health, and his top tip was to invest in leadership. Matt Tyra, with the bow tie, talked about valuing people, valuing experiences and skills and knowledge, valuing ourselves and enjoying what we do. And I have to say, I absolutely love my public health career and I love my public health family, so that absolutely resonates with me. Andrew talked about our professional leadership role and the way that we've inspired a collective effort covering pretty much every part of the public sector, and also talked about the ups being when local areas were trusted to get on and do stuff, which I think is something we would all agree with. Andrew also talked about appreciating what we have, which is fantastic. And David, of course, then talked about staying true, staying flexible, staying relevant, and carrying on doing the stuff that we do so well. So I think some fantastic messages in there from our key speakers, and I'd like to say thank you all for your contributions this afternoon. Before we finish, I want to take us right back to the start of Champs, and as Matt Tyra said, 4th of March 2003 in Aintree was the launch event for the Champs Public Health Network, and I think it's worth once again reminding ourselves about how that came to be. And I don't often get the opportunity to do this, so I think I'd like to reference John Ashton, his leadership and his vision in setting up the idea of public health networks in the first place. He talked about setting them up on a large enough footprint to have an impact, don't make them too small, and strategically matching other footprints like, for example, the Strategic Health Authority. Of course, it wasn't all John Ashton. People had to then take that vision and turn it into something real, and that wouldn't have happened without people like Janet Atherton and Ruth Hussey, and frankly, all the directors of public health around at the time and since who have continued to support the work of Champs. And as I always say, this isn't about directors of public health. This is about public health teams and the public health family. Over the years, the directors of public health, supported by their amazing teams and their amazing partners, have continued to lead the collaborative, and we'd like to say thank you to everybody who's been with us on that journey right from the start back in 2003 and right up to the present day. Happy birthday to Champs for 20 years of fantastic work, and here's to the next 20 years. And we're just going to introduce a short slideshow. Fantastic, and that brings back a lot of memories of people who are still in the system, but also not in the system, and whose contribution was fantastic. As I said before, not just Directors of Public Health, they're amazing teams and amazing partners we've worked with both now but also over the last 20 years. So thank you very much, everybody. Today we're just going to conclude with a Mentimeter. There is some stuff in the chat. We'd like you to log on to that website, which is menti.com, and there is a code to input into that website. The code is 16113934, and the idea behind this is capturing 3 key words as to what the collaborative has meant to you, and it will show up hopefully on the screen in the form of a word cloud. So please do give us some feedback both on the session but also just overall on Champs, and we want to capture this and use this. We will leave this up as we close the session, but I just want to conclude by saying thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance today. Hope you've enjoyed it. It's been amazing to see the contributions from partners. Thank you very much to the Champs support team for pulling this together. These things are never easy to pull together, so they've done a great job as usual, as they always do. And thank you to you all for being with us, and here's to the next 20 years. Thanks all.